Now that we have everything up in muslin on this chair, we can start on the deck. There's a couple different ways you can do your decks. This particular chair has a down and feather cushion. In these old chairs particularly, a lot of times you see them with what's called a tight seat. And a tight seat is just an upholstered seat here without any cushion. They were very popular when this chair was new. I suspect originally it probably had a tight seat, but at some point in time it's been altered to use a cushion. So what we're going to do is, obviously we're going to do this chair up for a cushion. And I'll show you how to go about that. To upholster this chair for a cushion, what we're going to do is we're going to have the cover fabric in the front. We're going to build that up slightly, and that will help hold our cushion in place. And I like to run my seam right behind the frame for the arms, which is right in there. We need to get a straight edge through here. You feel right where the frame is, and then I'm just going to take a pencil. We'll draw a straight line here. I'm also going to use that to sew on. And then we're going to need to measure, of course, from here back. And don't forget to give yourself enough extra to tuck through and to pull, and also side to side. And we will use a piece of denim on this section, and we will sew that to the cover fabric here. And you'll measure your cover fabric the same way, allowing yourself enough to come down over the front, over the sides, and give yourself enough so that you can have some room to pull. Before I start putting my cover fabric on, I've taken this tape measure and I have gone under the arms and right through to the outside of the frame rail. And then I measured, I held that tight and I pulled it snug, and I checked my measurement to the outside of the opposite frame rail. And we found our center mark to be right at 14 inches. And I marked that right on the... I have taken the cover fabric and I've tucked it under the arms, and I have lined my center mark on the cover fabric right up with the center mark that I put on the muslin. And you can also see the pencil lines where I drew my straight line. Now I'm going to line the salvage edge of this cover fabric right up with that pencil line, and I'm going to tack it tight on each side rail. Now you can see that I put those two staples inside of the salvage. That's on the inside of where the stitching is. We want to keep our staples to the inside on both sides of this chair. For this procedure, I am using a nylon hand stitching twine or thread and the smallest curved needle that I have. I like to start my knot on the outside of the chair here, just above the side rail, only because it's really difficult to reach in between the deck and the arm and to sew a good knot on there. It's a really hard place to get into. I found that it's a lot easier if I start out here on the outside. Nothing fancy. We just tie a knot on here just to keep our thread from slipping out on us. Then what I'll do is I'll start it here, and I'll go around to the other side of the chair and I'll pick it up. Okay, I've got a close-up here so you can see the stitch that I like to use. You can see where this thread comes up through. And what I like to do is I'll go back a couple of stitches, push my needle in, and I'll come up a few stitches ahead. of where I first went in there, where this thread came out. And poke around a little bit. You want it to get either right on where the stitch comes through or just a little bit in front of it is fine. There. And I'll use this same stitch all the way across to the other arm. I have completed the stitching across the front of the deck. Now you'll notice these stitches are, for the most part, I stayed right behind the machine stitching. You can see the machine stitching here, and here's my hand stitches. That's good. You can either go right on or right in front of, excuse me. If you stay just in front of them, it's probably a little safer that they won't be seen when you flip this over. Once our decking has been sewn down, we can put on our cotton. I'm going to be using 2 layers of cotton for this deck. I want to get it evenly centered. And you'll notice that I have this long enough to run down the front and on each side. And what we want to do is we want to build this up to help hold our cushion in place. So I'm going to take this first layer and I'm just going to tuck that underneath across the front here. And again we need to tear around our arms. That can come right off the sides. And we can also fold these sides up as well. We're going to take some of this off because I don't really want it to be bunched up here. So what I'll do is I'll tear this back here where it folded under the first time. And then we'll tuck that under. That way there we get the same amount of excess on the side and on the front. And hopefully we won't get a big lump here. So I'll do the same. Now we can go with our second layer. Make sure it's even across the middle. Around the arms. I want this to come right down the front. Sometimes you can just hold it and give it a little tug. This cotton will stretch a little. Now you'll notice our corners here. We've got quite a bit of bunched up here in the corners. So what we want to do on these corners is just feel where the edge is, tear this up, let that come down on the side, hold your hand there and tear that off like that. We'll kind of tear it from around that front corner. Now we can pull this up through. It's got to come up from under our arms. Remember, it's sewn down and tacked, so you're not going to be able to pull that too tight. I'm going to have to slowly work this out through. And when it gets to a certain point here, we can't pull anymore. We're going to have to cut a little bit. In order to pull this finished or final cover fabric up over the front of our deck, we're going to need to cut some relief cuts. Now we're going to need to cut right along this seam that we use to sew the deck material to the denim. We don't want to cut the denim. We just want to go along this edge, and we try not to cut our stitches. We don't want this to all come unstitched later on. So we'll just follow this right up through, and we want to go just about to where this frame ends, but you can stay back a little bit. Just, you don't want to go too far, and then we'll be able to pull this out and pull this across the front. Now when I'm pulling my fabric down, I always like to start in the center. And as we pull, we want to watch our cotton underneath. We want this cotton to stay back along the seam. And sometimes when you're pulling, this is going to want to roll and creep away from that. So you want to make sure you keep that tucked back in there. Also, you're going to want to watch your cotton that it doesn't roll underneath your frame. That'll cause lumps. So we can kind of feather that away there a little bit. Use your hand to smooth this out and help pull it down. Sometimes you can just take your two fingers and just hold that where you want it and let it curl underneath. Put a couple staples in there. And then we'll just work this across. What I'll do now is I'll pull two ways. I'll pull kind of on a diagonal here, which will pull it here to the outside of the chair, and it'll also pull this back to the outside, like this. And we'll use the same motion with our hand. This kind of helps pull the fabric down. And roll it under. As you can see, we've got a little bit of cotton here that wants to creep underneath the frame. Kind of feather that back. And use your two fingers. Then I'll go on the other side and we'll do the same procedure. And then we're going to have to make some relief cuts for around the bottom of these arms.